The wind off the silver sea no longer carried the bite of black frost. It was crisp, salted, and light, sweeping up the sheer face of the newly carved cliffside and whispering through the tall grass that had begun to reclaim the scorched earth. Below, the dark, churning waters that had swallowed the northern part of the continent a month ago had settled into a steady cadence, lapping gently against the freshly broken stone far beneath the precipice. Kneeling at the edge of the world sat Rian. He had changed in the 30 days since the earth had torn itself apart. His hair was longer, unkempt, and wild around his ears, and a coarse shadow of dark stubble lined his jawline. As the morning sun caught the hard angles of his face, the likeness was striking. For the first time, he bore the unmistakable, rugged weight of his father. Before him rested a tall, carefully stacked cairn of heavy river stones, built upon the exact spot where Hokar had struck the earth with the unsheathed crystal. Embedded deep into the center of the cairn was Rian's longsword. The blade had been driven true into the heart of the stone mound, its pommel reaching toward the sky like a lonely sentinel overlooking the new sea. In just 4 short weeks, nature had moved with quiet, stubborn speed to heal the scar. Green shoots of mountain grass and pale, delicate roots had already taken hold around the base of the steel, creeping up the crossguard and binding the metal to the memorial. Rian didn't touch the hilt. He simply sat on his heels, resting his elbows on his knees, staring fixatedly at the place where the steel met the stone. The vast, endless chasm stretched out before him, miles wide, bathed in the calm, golden hues of a quiet morning. The silence ahead was still there, vast, profound, and peaceful. Soft footsteps rustled through the grass behind him, breaking the quiet cadence of the waves below. Rian didn't need to turn his head to know who it was. The familiar, steady warmth of her presence settled beside him as Adora sank onto her knees in the soft earth. She was dressed in deep, forest-green fabric that was fresh, unmarred by soot or blood, and draped with a quiet, reverent dignity. But it was the subtle gleam catching the morning sun upon her brow that drew the eye, a delicate and finely wrought golden circlet. It was the mark of a general among their people. In the weeks following the shattering of the North, as the surviving armies consolidated and the true scope of her bravery on the front lines as well as in the frozen North became clear, the High Council had unanimously elevated her rank. The doubts, the quiet dismissals, and the walls she had spent years fighting against had finally crumbled away into the chasm alongside Umbara's horde. She had earned the unwavering respect and gratitude of every surviving soul in Eithilgard. Adora looked out over the endless blue expanse of the Silver Sea, her hand coming to rest lightly on her knee. For a long time, neither of them spoke, letting the cool ocean breeze carry the peaceful silence between them. "I thought I'd find you here," she said softly, her voice carrying none of the harshness of the battlefield, only a deep, abiding warmth. Rian reached out, his hand steady as his fingers brushed against the rough surface of the memorial. He nudged a small, smooth granite stone, adjusting it until it sat firmly nestled against the others, locking the cairn into place. With a soft and deliberate sweep of his thumb, he brushed away a layer of pale green moss that had begun to creep across the front of the mound. "I like it here," Rian said quietly, his voice low and raspy against the ocean breeze. "It's peaceful." Adora looked at him, her eyes softening beneath the golden circlet on her brow. She gave a gentle nod, letting her silence agree with him as she gazed across the vast, sparkling waters of the sea. The peace wasn't just here at the edge of the cliff. It had spread like a healing wave across the entire world. To the west, across the sprawling plains and mountain passes, the lands of Aldenor, where the human kingdoms of Nostrudor endured, had finally laid down centuries of old grudges, fear, and blood. In the wake of the northern catastrophe, a new, lasting alliance had been forged between the men of Nostrudor and the elves of Eithilgard. The great western bridge that linked their nations, once a strictly guarded choke point built on mistrust and bitter history, was now flung wide open on both sides. Where war parties had once marched, merchant wagons now crossed beneath open banners. Trade flourished, ideas flowed freely, and a pact of mutual aid stood sworn by both crowns. A promise that no matter what shadows might ever dare to rise again, neither people would ever stand alone. Even the colossal collapse that had choked the ancient and buried entrance of Mount Calum, where thousands of tons of jagged rubble and fallen stone had sealed the mountain off for generations, had been completely cleared. Under the combined efforts of human stonemasons and elven artisans, the massive boulders were hewn, cleared, and shaped into a grand, arched gateway. For the first time in memory, sunlight poured directly into the mountain's grand threshold, leaving the darkened sanctuary fully accessible to the world outside. The change across the valley was staggering. No longer driven by fear to skulk within deep crags, shadowy caverns, and hidden passages, the elves had finally stepped out into the open sky. Across the vast, fertile rolling hills surrounding Mount Calum, new life was taking root. Sprawling farmlands, vibrant orchards, and winding irrigation tributaries now carved through the earth, fed by the clear mountain streams. The people of Aethelgard were no longer just surviving behind stone and shadow. They were living, building, and harvesting under the open sun. Adora was the first to break the stillness. With a soft exhale, she pushed herself up from the grass, her green robes settling around her. She turned to Rian and extended a hand toward him. Rian stared at her palm for a moment, then reached up, grasping her hand as she pulled him back up to his feet. He stretched his shoulders, rolling his neck until a faint pop echoed over the sound of the ocean below. "What's actually on the slate for today?" Rian asked, dusting off his dirt-stained knees and running a hand through his scruffy hair. "I'll be honest, it's completely slipped my mind." Adora stopped mid-step and threw him a wonderfully flat, sarcastic glance, raising an eyebrow so high it nearly touched the gold on her brow. "Slipped your mind?" she repeated, her tone dripping with mock disbelief. "Rian, a whole army could march up this cliff, and you'd probably ask them if they were here for tea because you forgot the invasion schedule. The council is meeting at the gates at noon, followed by the trade envoy arriving from Nostrudor, a day you specifically agreed to oversee." She shook her head, though the ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "I swear, Hokar gave you his bravery, but he definitely left out his ability to keep a calendar." Rian let out a genuine laugh, a sound that felt strangely foreign in his own chest after so many weeks, but remarkably light. "Fair enough," he conceded, adjusting the tunic over his shoulders. "I'll let you handle the schedules from now on, General." Side by side, they turned their backs to the vast blue expanse of the Silver Sea and began the slow trek up the winding dirt path toward Mount Calum. There was no rush in their steps. For the first time in either of their lives, the horizon wasn't threatening to burst into flame, and the air carried only the sweet, earthy scent of turned soil from the new farmlands. As they rounded the final bend, the towering stone archway of the mountain gates rose against the sky, newly carved and bathed in warm sunlight. Leaning idly against the massive stone pillar was a small, familiar figure. It was Lyra. The moment her eyes caught sight of the two figures walking up the sunlit path, her face lit up like the dawn. Any sense of patience vanished instantly. She burst into a full sprint, her small feet kicking up dust as she tore across the grass toward them. Before either of them could utter a greeting, Lyra collided with them, throwing her small arms as far as they would reach around both Rian and Adora's waists at once, burying her face into their tunics with an absolute unyielding hug. "Hey, little one," Rian murmured, a real and warm smile breaking across his face as he wrapped an arm securely around the girl's small shoulders. Beside him, Adora bent down, her own arm enveloping Lyra from the other side, holding her close. Adora nudged the girl gently with her elbow, casting a teasing glance up at Rian. "You know, Lyra," Adora jested softly, "this prince of ours was almost lost again out there, but thanks to your charm, and maybe a bit of my babysitting, we saved him." Lyra threw her head back and let out a loud, ringing "Yay!" that echoed happily off the ancient stone walls of the gateway. Before they could even let go, another figure came dashing out from the archway. A motherly woman came into frame, huffing and puffing as she struggled to catch her breath, her hands resting briefly on her knees. "Lyra!" the woman called out between ragged breaths, her cheeks flushed red. "How many times have I told you not to run off like that?" She abruptly cut herself off as she lifted her head and caught sight of who her daughter was clinging to. Instantly the mother straightened up, pulling her spine pin straight. Her face softened into a mix of awe and flustered panic as she offered a deep, formal bow. "Oh, hello, my prince," she stammered, smoothing down her apron with nervous hands. "1,000 apologies for the little one, my lord. She gets so ahead of herself." "Don't worry about it at all," Rian replied easily, giving the mother a warm, respectful bow of his own. The woman offered a breathless smile as she took a soft hold of Lyra's small hand. Lyra reluctantly let go of Rian's waist, allowing her mother to guide her away. Every few steps she twisted around to wave again, grinning so broadly it seemed impossible her face could hold it. Rian and Adora both raised their hands, waving back until the mother and child rounded the stone curve of the gateway and vanished into the bustling courtyard beyond. Rian watched the empty archway for a moment, the faint smile still lingering on his lips as he fell into step beside Adora again. "You know," Rian said softly, adjusting his cloak over his shoulder, "I have a feeling that little girl is going to want to become just like you when she grows up." Adora paused, her boots coming to a complete stop against the gravel of the path. Her gaze remained fixed on the spot where Lyra had just disappeared into the sunlit archway, a rare, profound stillness settling over her features. For a long moment, the gentle breeze was the only sound between them, softly ruffling the forest-green fabric of her robes. "No," Adora murmured, her voice devoid of any arrogance or regret, filled only with a deep and resolute certainty. "She will become better than me." Rian stopped alongside her, looking at the hard-won peace reflected in her eyes. He didn't offer a platitude or a protest. He understood precisely what she meant. The legacy of a generation that fought so the next wouldn't have to carry the same scars, build the same armor, or fight the same quiet battles just to be seen. A soft, knowing nod was all he gave. He fell back into step beside her, and together they passed under the grand stone archway into the light of the morning. Rian paused just beneath the shade of the grand archway, taking one final look back over his shoulder. Far in the distance, bathed in the soft golden haze of the morning, the stone cairn on the precipice was barely visible, a small silent sentinel standing watch over the infinite blue of the silver sea. A knowing smile touched his lips. He didn't say a prayer, nor did he weep. The warmth of Hokar's legacy wasn't buried out there on the cliffside. It was beat for beat inside his own chest. He looked at Adora, his voice carrying a light, unshakable calm. "Come on." As his boots struck the stone, a strange, profound realization settled over Rian's mind. The lost days, the shattered memories, the ghost of the boy he had been before the injury. None of it mattered anymore. He no longer needed those lost pieces to make himself whole. This man, tempered by fire, bound by love, and forged in the quiet strength of sacrifice, was the person he was meant to be. His mind drifted for a brief moment to Garth. He wondered what his friend would think of this wide, open sky, what he would say to the open gates, the elven crops in the valley, and the laughter of children echoing through corridors that had once known only tension and fear. Rian reached up, his fingers brushing against his collar until they found the cold and familiar pendant. He wrapped his hand around Garth's necklace, resting it over his heart where it truly belonged. "We did it," he thought into the quiet expanse of his mind. "We brought them peace."